Can I call for apologies? I have personally received apologies from Councillor Granger and Dr. Bealby, and I'm prepared to move those apologies. Can I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Hollis. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? And that is carried. There is no public forum today and no late items and no confidential business to transfer into the open. Can I please ask colleagues, are there any declarations of conflict of interest? No, there are none. If we can move now to business 7.1, Bay Venues Capital and Renewals Expenditure and Pricing Review, proposals for our draft annual plan. And we have presenting to us this afternoon Gary Dawson from Chief Executive of Bay Venues and his team. Gary, if you'd be so kind as to lead us off and introduce your team as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Your Worship, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to for BVL to present our submission to the 2020-21 draft annual plan. We're all set to go? Okay. All right. By way of introduction, can I just introduce my senior leadership team who are sitting to my right. So we have Justine Brennan. Justine is our Chief Operating Officer and is largely responsible for our day-to-day relationship with Council. Adam Elmers, who is our Chief Financial Officer, who has been working through a lot of the numbers that you'll see today and in our submission. And Tina Harris-Liranui, who is our Manager for Venues and Programs. This is a large part of, or Tina manages a large part of what we do, particularly in the delivery of community outputs. So you'll see in our submission that makes up a big part of what we're proposing. So it's great to have Tina here today. Also supporting us are a large number of our board members. We have Michael Smith, our chairman. We have also Mary Ann McLeod, Keith Tempest and Colin Groves. And our board has been very much part of our process in preparing our submission and making sure that it's the quality that you would expect from BVL. So Mr. Chairman, those are the people who are here today. And if it's okay with you, what I would like to do is to go through a presentation which gives an overview of our submission. I'm happy to take any questions for clarification during that presentation, but if it's okay, any detailed, more rigorous questions, if we could leave those to the end. I'll answer the pretty easy ones. The difficult ones I'll hand to my senior leadership team, and the really difficult ones I'll give to the board. So if we could proceed along those lines, we'll go for it. When BVL make any major decisions or make any proposals or submissions, one of the things that we always try and do is remind ourselves of what our purpose is and what our vision is. And in preparing this submission, we have gone through that process. And we are the kaitiaki of community facilities. In other words, we are the stewards, the guardians of your facilities, of this city's facilities. And it is our job to make sure that we enhance the quality of those facilities, the quality of life of the residents of Tauranga, and we make sure that they have great experiences. So when we prepare this submission to you, we are always thinking about, will these things meet our vision and meet our purpose? BVL, as you know, is a council-controlled organisation. We were set up back in 2013, so we've been going for really 7 years now. And our job is to provide services to the community on council's behalf, while at the same time having an arm's length relationship with council. Sometimes that arm can be reasonably short, and sometimes that arm can be quite long, depending on the issues that are being dealt with. We're also expected to be entrepreneurial and have a commercial focus. And by commercial focus, that does not necessarily mean that we are there to produce profit. If we were, we would be a council-controlled trading organisation. But we do have a board that insists that we do things in a commercial way and with the rigours of a commercial organisation. We try to be responsive to opportunities, and we obviously must be financially sustainable. And the way that we try and do that is to use our commercial network. So these are some of the businesses that we've got, such as our catering business, our events business, the Mount Hot Pools, for example, and we try and use the returns that we get from those facilities to help subsidise the community facilities. And in that way, we try and reduce the reliance on ratepayers. We try and decrease the burden that ratepayers would normally face running community type facilities. Does the model work? Well, we believe that for bay venues, for Tauranga, it does work. In 2017, it was a requirement of council, as when they set us up, that there would be an independent review of bay venues. And that independent review found that we're in extremely good shape and producing very pleasing results. We have increased revenue over the period of time we've been in existence by 54%, and the reliance on rates has reduced. So our operating subsidy per user has decreased from $1.67 when we were established to now being around the figure of $1.27. So the only time we come to council to get an increase in that subsidy has just been a CPI increase each year. We have not sought any increases in that subsidy since our inception. The number of visitors going through our facilities has increased exponentially, and we believe that we've brought new initiatives and new revenue streams to the city, in particular things like the Adams Centre and Bay Dreams, hugely successful enterprises that give profile to the city. So we believe that the model that we currently work under in partnership with council is working, and we are delivering the services that council require. How do we sustain this success? Well, we need to first of all make sure that wherever possible we're recovering our operating costs through user fees. And in the funded network, that's the community part of what we do, we need council approval to increase those fees. In the commercial side, we don't need council approval. So a big part of today's submission is seeking your approval for some user fees in that community part of the network. The second thing that we must continue to do is to drive more revenue through new initiatives. So for example, if you take the Adams Centre, that was a new initiative. Council supported us with capital to build that, and that has driven new revenues for us, which has then gone to help subsidise the community part of our organisation, but also deliver some really good community outputs as well. And thirdly, we need to continue to replace our assets as they wear out. As you would have seen from the presentation that most of you, I think, attended last week from Visitor Solutions, looking at the needs analysis of Tauranga City and where the growth is going and how our facilities are operating, you would have seen that in general, the facilities that we manage on your behalf are being worked very, very hard. And in particular, the big 4 or 5 ones such as Baywave, the Mount Hot Pools, the Adams Centre, the Bay Park, Trustpower Bay Park Arena, they are all getting very close to being fully utilised when you benchmark them against like facilities around the country. So our submission today speaks to these 3 points. We are looking to have a discussion in your support around user fees and our proposal there. We are looking for a new capital to help us drive revenue and be more efficient. And we are looking to obviously replace assets through a renewals program because the wear and tear of them means that's a requirement. Just a very high level summary form. We have a number of projects that have gone through our internal process. We had a number of projects that we rejected, and I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail in a minute. If all those projects were to be approved by council for funding, that would be an increase of $5.3 million over the current allocation in the long-term plan. So that would be if all those projects were approved. We, however, understand that, you know, that in the real world, and you guys are facing some very, very difficult decisions, and council doesn't necessarily have a huge amount of money to spend on capital projects. So we have recommended a partial option, which are two projects which we think are absolutely necessary, and we have recommended the deferral of some other ones. So that would mean a net increase of just over $700,000 as opposed to $5 million if all the projects were to be accepted. With regard to renewals, this is the replacement of worn assets. We work very closely with council staff in terms of asset management, and we're looking for a net increase of $1.3 million over what is currently in the plan, and I'll talk a bit more detail about that. And then, as I said before, we're looking for your support to be able to increase our operating revenue in the funded network by $550,000 to help meet some of the costs that we have increasing to, or costs that we're incurring, have incurred and will continue to incur. So speaking to the capital requests that we have, you'll see there at the very top a figure of just under $6.2 million. So that's what's currently approved in the LTP for spending for next year. And you'll see down the left-hand side the list of options that we're proposing. So we have an extension to the Adams Centre, which is building a new gymnasium. We have a major upgrade to the Greerton Aquatic Centre. At Bay Wave, we are proposing, or we would like to build a high-intensity training studio. And at Trustpower Bay Park, we have a project which we'd like to have funded, which is an operations centre for our operations team, including storage facilities for other users. There are a number of smaller projects, and we are also proposing that the Trustpower Bay Park Event Centre, which had a figure in there for next year, that we defer that to the next long-term plan, because there's further work to be done as a result of the citywide needs analysis and feasibility studies and different options there. So option 1A really is all those things. Option 1B is a partial request on our behalf, which really is the Adams Centre and the Greerton Aquatic Centre, deferring the HIT studio, deferring the operations hub, and deferring the Bay Park Event Centre. University of Waikato Centre for High Performance. What we are proposing is a new purpose-built gym, and to repurpose the existing gym area inside the building for office space. There'll be connection then between the two buildings, and the space 50 Miro Street next door, where there's a house at the moment, we are looking to use that for car parking. So this is the area here where the new gymnasium would go. It's currently car park. This at the moment is where the gymnasium is, and this is Miro Street along here. And this property here we own and have a house on it. So by building the gymnasium here, we kill off a lot of car parks, and we're proposing that they be replaced over here, connecting the two up and turning this area into office space. Why do we want to do this? Well, we have real capacity issues. The University of Waikato, their program, their research program, everything they're doing has increased hugely, and New Zealand Rugby are demanding more space, particularly office space, for their staff. They want to bring more people here to be based in Tauranga. And the lease we have with them really goes to the end of the Tokyo Olympics later this year, and then everything will be reviewed. So we believe that in order to mitigate the risk of losing New Zealand Rugby and all the associated jobs and the prestige, the profile that comes with having them there, we do need to urgently build this gymnasium to free up the office space, both for University of Waikato and for New Zealand Rugby. At the moment we have anywhere between 70 and 80 local developing athletes as part of our academy program. By building this purpose-built gym, we can enable another 160 young athletes to come in and be part of that academy program. So that would take that number up to around about 240. It means that we can grow our 3 revenue streams, so we'll increase revenue from tenancies in the office area. We will increase the amount of revenue we get from the academy and from training camps. And by doing this too, it leverages on the momentum already created by the Adams Centre and Bay Oval in terms of positioning Tauranga as a centre of excellence for high performance sport. So what sort of community outputs do we have? What's the benefit of the Adams Centre and the sort of things that we're doing? Well, since its inception, we have directly created 80 highly skilled sports management, athlete development, sports science jobs in Tauranga based at the Adams Centre. In addition to that, there are 12 PhD students from all around the world who are conducting international research in sports science. So one of the real, I think, benefits of having the Adams Centre is that, it is a centre of excellence. It is a place where sports-related jobs are created, which is a real boost to our local economy, and it is something that gives this city real profile. With the academy, we once again contribute significantly to the development of young athletes in this region. They don't have to leave Tauranga to go to the Waikato or up to Auckland to be able to compete nationally and internationally. So this project we estimate will cost about $5.3 million. And Adam can speak to the detail of this a bit later on if you require, but it has an internal rate of return of 5% and a payback period of 13 years. Because it's not part of our funded network, it means that we do need to cover the cost of interest and depreciation, and it will, from year one, add $265,000 in EBITDA. So, while the financial returns aren't significant, it certainly washes its face, and that we believe that the non-financial benefits, both to the centre but also to Tauranga, certainly outweigh those financial returns. The Greerton Aquatic and Leisure Centre, so this is the upgrade. And what we're looking to do there, just by way of information, the Greerton Aquatic Centre was built well over 40 years ago. 20 years ago it got a birthday, so it got a temporary roof put over it. And the only other thing that's happened to it in terms of a development of that facility is a couple of years ago Council helped us invest in heating the Luna's pool. So pretty much it's a facility that's very much the same as it's always been for 40 years. And it is a key part of our aquatics network, as you would have seen from the Visitor Solutions presentation, and it's one that will remain a key part of our aquatics network for the next 10 to 15 years. It's absolutely essential for us to develop this and keep it open in terms of our aquatic network. So the first thing we need to do is to upgrade and develop new changing rooms. There's just inadequate space at the moment. We are looking to upgrade the reception area and offices to improve the functionality of that area, and to upgrade the front entrance. At the moment, if you've ever been to Greerton, you know that in the winter time the wind just blows through there. It takes away the air temperature, it cools the pool down, and we have tried putting up all sorts of solutions to mitigate the problem, and it really does need a complete redesign. We want to increase the recreation and leisure amenities. At the moment it is pretty much lap pools, and more of our users want those sort of leisure amenities there. There's more parking that's required because we're increasing the numbers there. By reconfiguring the lanes we can increase capacity, and we have got, because of the relatively old nature of the facility, we do need to put in new handrails and concourses to cut down the number of slips that we have. We have got a temporary grandstand that's non-compliant, and that has to be replaced, and we have watertight sections of the cladding. So some of these projects are new capital and some are renewals, but really what we're saying is we want to give Greerton Aquatic Centre a birthday, an upgrade. It's urgently needed, and it's an important part of our network. This is not news to you, but our city is growing. That whole area is experiencing growth, particularly in that Western Corridor area. As I said, it was built in 1971, and we really haven't invested too much into it. And just to reiterate, that citywide needs assessment identifies the importance of Greerton. So we're seeking your support for the capital projects that we want to do, and also the renewals projects. So the funding request is for just over 1.1 million. Really 1.1 million is already approved in the LTP, but we have additional renewals of 1.25 million to coincide with the shutdown. So one of the things that's happened with us is that because of the work we've had to do at Bay Wave and the timing of that, we've had to rejig the timing of the closing of our other aquatics facilities. We couldn't close 2 or 3 of them in 1 year, and so we've had to bring some renewals forward and put some back, and a lot of this additional renewals is outside of what we had planned to do, but it's work that is needed and is funded through the renewals fund. This is part of our funded network, and we are requesting that TCC cover the interest on the capital works component of this project. And a very low internal rate of return. It's very hard to get a high IRR when you're talking about changing rooms and reception areas. They don't generate a lot of revenue. The Trustpower Bay Park Operations Hub. Trustpower Bay Park is a really important and I think underestimated part of the wider recreation and entertainment network in the city. We have got a huge number of people coming through here. We host a huge number of events, and our operations team are operating out of temporary facilities. So this is the team that does all the event setup. They are doing the grounds. They have a lot of machinery coming and going. They have a need to storage. We also have our audiovisual team based here, and they are at the moment having to store a lot of their expensive equipment off-site. So what we're proposing, I don't know whether you can see this, but down here where we currently have a bit of a storage area outdoors, building 5 20-metre by 20-metre storage facilities. So some of these will be used internally by us, and some we are looking to leasing out to organisations such as event companies that use our facilities and have got a connection with us, so getting a commercial return there. At the moment, this middle pavilion here, it was where we store a lot of equipment, and we believe that by moving that equipment out of there and putting it into a specialised storage facility here, this frees this up for recreation user space. The end one, for example, at the moment is being used by gym sports, and we believe that that middle pavilion could be used by other sports. So better utilisation of those facilities, better fit for purpose facilities. It will make a safer environment for our operations team. At the moment they're operating down here, and you've got cars coming in to play sport, or the visitors playing sport in that here. You've got a lot of traffic movement, a lot of health and safety issues. I've covered pretty much most of that. So we want to ensure that Trustpower Bay Park remains very vibrant. It continues to be a great events venue, and we want to make sure that we can free up some of that space for community sports and commercial and associated commercial users who have links with us. The price tag for this project is estimated to be just over 2.2 million, which includes quite a bit of geotechnical work. The land there in all of Bay Park, requires a lot of additional work to be done from a geotechnical nature, and you can see there the financials for it. High intensity interval training. I'm sure there's a number of you who are familiar with this type of training. What we are proposing to do on the Girvan Road side of Bay Wave is build a specialist HIT Studio. ClubFit plays a real key role in our total network. It is very profitable. It is very popular. We have increasing membership. But what we don't have is a product that meets local demand in this HIT training area. My understanding is that some of the other offerings in the city, there are waiting lists for people to join them. So we believe that there is a space here that could be converted and extended to provide a HIT studio, and that's got benefits not only from a health and fitness point of view, but it also will increase our revenues and our ability to subsidise the community part of our business. So this comes with a price tag of just over 2.4 million. It's got quite a good internal rate of return, and it will contribute at that EBITDA level quite significantly right from the very beginning. So those are the capital projects. In terms of our renewals, this is prepared, our renewals request is prepared closely with TCC staff, because the system that we use for asset management is based on Tauranga City Council's asset management system. And we have a high level of budgeting in the current LTP, and the very nature of some of the work that we do and the timing of things that we've had to do means that there are some what we call ins and outs. So some projects that we had anticipated to do next year, we've had to bring them forward. Other projects will perhaps defer them. So currently approved in the current long-term plan is a figure of 4.5 million, and we're seeking an increase on that of 1.3. So the main projects are some additional work at Greaton, as I've talked about before, and the hot pools. Now the hot pools requires a new tank filtration system in the plant room. The current one, if you go in there, it's got a huge bulge in it, and the lifespan of that is questionable. So we've brought that slightly forward. So that's the summary of what we're looking for in terms of the renewals. And there is obviously more detail in the reports that you've received. Finally, if I can just speak to our request to you to support us in increasing our operating revenue. As I said before, the subsidy that we get from Tauranga City Council, this is our operating subsidy, our grant from you, has not increased since our establishment, other than an annual CPI adjustment. We can't increase prices in our funded network beyond CPI without council approval. So when I talked before about a short arm and a long arm relationship, this is the short arm. And we are seeking your approval in this area, and I'll talk about the options in a minute. I think it's fair to say that when you come to talk about pricing of community facilities and swimming pools and that, it is an incredibly sensitive area. And people, they value the facilities they use, but if you increase the cost by even a small amount, there is a huge amount of pushback. And we have for some time now known that we do need to address this, and now's the time for us to do it. And so while it's difficult and there's a lot of complexity to it, one of the things that we have tried to do in this process is to simplify our whole pricing structure, across our community halls, our community centres, our swimming pools, to make sure that we have got more consistency across the network, and to make sure that it's as simple as we can make it. So that's been one objective, but the other one is to look at pricing and benchmark against what's happening in other places, and to do that we engaged an organisation, a firm of consultants who are experts in this area to help us, and we've also needed to find ways in which we can help recover some of the costs of running what are very expensive facilities. So really it boils down to three options that we have. One is we come to you and say we want to increase the operating subsidy, or two, we increase the prices. So we either have one where the burden falls on ratepayers, or we have one where the burden falls on users, or we have a hybrid where there's a little bit of pain for everybody. And we are proposing that council consider that hybrid model where there is some price increases, but also we have got more costs involved with compliance, with electricity, all the normal things, and they are well and above what we would normally be able to recover from a CPI increase. So what we're proposing then is that we increase user fees by 400,000 and in a variety of ways across the network, and that we ask council for support in terms of increasing our subsidy from council by 150,000 per year. We believe that this will have a lower impact on users than full cost recovery, and it will have a lower impact on rates than full cost recovery through the subsidy option. And also, if it's approved by council, it will streamline our pricing structure, and it will mean that we've got a simpler pricing model and we'll be able to digitise a lot easier what we're doing there. So that is our preference, and there are a number of other options in the paper, but that's what we are looking to do. So, Mr. Chairman, councillors, that's the end of my presentation, and we welcome any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Chief Executive Gary. Can I take the opportunity to acknowledge both yourself and your team on behalf of my colleagues and the work that you do for our collective community. And I also want to acknowledge the presence of the board here in the chamber today as well. Colleagues, when you're making a question, if I could just have a request for Councillor Baldock who's listening in, if you could speak directly into your microphone when you're asking your question, that will assist him. Councillor Baldock and Councillor Kitty were exceptional at speaking directly into the microphone when I was listening in last week. So if you could do that, that would be much appreciated. Are there any questions, colleagues? I've got one from Councillor Clout and Councillor Hughes. Councillor Clout.
Thank you very much, Gary and team, the whole team. I really appreciate the effort you've put into this request and also your presentation. Just so one key question, you talked about New Zealand Rugby potentially being in danger of relocating. Is this just something that you have assumed is going to happen, or I mean, I'm assuming you have had quite important, rigorous discussions with them. Can you just give us a bit more clarity around how real that potential is?
I could do that, and I'll ask Justine to answer that in more detail, because she's been the one that's been working with them. What I can say, and I've had quite a bit of experience in my lifetime with New Zealand Rugby, and when we first built the Adams Centre, they were pretty difficult to deal with, very demanding, but I can say that we have been working in partnership with them. They are not threatening us in any way or form, but the reality is that in Hutt Valley there is a new high performance centre. Napier is positioning itself as a high performance centre. New Plymouth is about to embark on a major high performance strategy for that city. So we cannot take New Zealand Rugby being here for granted. So we are trying to be more proactive and making sure that we give them no reason to even want to think about leaving. So I just want to make that clear, that there is no threat from them, but certainly we don't want to lose them, and certainly by doing this development, not only do we provide a better facility for them and all the benefits of that, but there are all the other benefits around the academy and so on. So, Justine, I don't know whether I've left anything for you to answer there.
I will chip in here and just add a couple of things, because I think it's a really important question. And I want to reiterate, although Gary's mentioned there's no threat, there is a threat. They're not making a threat, but there is a threat to us in terms of losing them as a tenant. So quite simply, they do not have the room, and it's not just about growth. They do not have the room to continue their current business as usual operations from the centre, and I'll give the example of the office that I have spent sort of 3 or 4 years in, and it was reasonably roomy, but they've got 6 people in there. And that's not the only room that they've got people squashed into, and they simply just cannot continue to do that. So they've given us an undertaking that up until the Olympics they will just make that work, but it's not easy for them. They're having discussions with athletes, personal, private, confidential discussions where they're having to have in the cafe down the road, and they just simply do not have enough room to make a long-term commitment to that centre. As you know, they have centralised their program, and their athletes and their management staff are incredibly happy to be based here. They love Tauranga, they love Mount Maunganui, and the community's really welcomed them. But they simply can't make a long-term commitment to the centre in its current form.
Thank you. Just one very quick follow-up question, if I may. So I'm assuming also that you have a business plan such that even if we approved this development and we still lost New Zealand Rugby, that there is sufficient demand from other sports and other organisations that would want to take up that space, because that's another very important aspect.
Yeah, I don't think we would have necessarily have difficulty filling the space. What we would have difficulty in doing is filling the space with another NSO. And that is a national sporting organisation. It is really important to us in terms of adding to the credibility and the strategy of what we're trying to achieve there. So New Zealand Rugby is certainly easier to retain what you've already got. The hoops that they had to jump through to centralise their program, that would be a process that would take another sport years to get through. So, we would potentially, whilst we'd be able to rent that space out, it wouldn't be to an organisation that held the mana of a national sporting organisation like they certainly do.
Councillor Hughes, you had a question.
Yes, I'm wondering about the increase in relationship with the University of Waikato, and I did notice that when I was in there that, as you say, the spaces are really, really cramped. How are we looking for future-proofing the new building next door if it still seems to me that might be quite small, and have we looked at 2 stories for that space, because I realise that your footprint is limited?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I think what I can say is that when we first opened the doors in January 2016, we had a very enthusiastic board that not only the Baby News board, but we put together an Adams Centre board as well, which had an advisory board which had membership from the University of Waikato. And we've used that as a mechanism to really build the relationship and enable the university to really engage with us in terms of what their needs are. So we've got a really good handle on that. And from that point, January 2016 or even beforehand, that board was pushing myself and the management team to expand. We're going to have to expand the centre. We're going to have to expand. What are the plans for expansion? And it's taken us 4 years to work out what is the best way to do that, because there were so many options available to us at the beginning, things like accommodation for athletes, for example. Over the last 4 years, we now have a very good handle on exactly how we need to grow and develop and expand. We also know exactly how our neighbours are going to develop and expand. For example, Bay of Plenty Rugby are developing an athlete accommodation building next door to us, and so we don't need to do that. What we need is more office space, more meeting room space, and a fit for purpose, purpose-built gym space. Now, the option that you've got in front of you today is the culmination of 3 years of that thinking. So yes, we have looked at whether we could go 2-storey. The simple answer to that is there is not adequate parking to do that, and nor is there a need for a 2-storey gym. Now, the cost differential for a 2-storey office building over what we have proposed, which is essentially a shed in terms of its specifications, would make this financially unfeasible. And whilst the financial business case behind this isn't, exceptional, it certainly does, as Gary said, wash its face. So I strongly believe that having looked at all of the options around this for a number of years, that what we've put in front of you today is absolutely the best option for the centre.
Thank you. I just have one more unrelated question to that. and it's you talking about wages. Do we pay the living wage?
No, we don't. So I think a year or so ago, council introduced the living wage for council staff and just staff, but council did not require, or we were separate from that, so we don't pay the living wage, no. And a large number of our people are being paid below the living wage.
Has there been any? Have you got any? Sorry, supplement to that. Have you got any figures on what that would look like if we did pay the living wage?
We did provide council with an indication, a paper giving an indication of that, I think a year or so ago when council were considering it. I have a figure in my mind. Adam, it was about 1.6 million. I had 1.5, yeah, including relativity. So it's not just the cost of introducing the living wage, but because a high proportion of our staff are at the low end of the remuneration scale, you've got a lot of relativities that you have to deal with right up until, not senior management such as us, but middle management and below. So it comes with a big price tag. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I'd like to invite Councillor Baldock. Do you have a question? Councillor Robson. Councillor Baldock, do you have a question?
I'll follow through with. Yes, I do.
Okay, I'll just take a question.
Am I coming through?
Yes, you actually, if you could proceed with your question, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Gary and Justine. And I can't quite see who was there, but I heard you say the board are there. So greetings to them. I just wanted to clarify around C of the proposed motion, the deferring of those three items. What would be not being able to do anything more on them for a year if it was left to the LTP. Can you comment on what the impact of that would be?
If you take the Trustpower Bay Park Operations Hub, the impact of that is that our team would have to have another couple of years of working in what we believe are inadequate facilities for them. It would mean that we have another couple of years of machinery and traffic movement that increases the risk of accidents, and it means another couple of years of not being able to maximise those facilities, both the pavilion which would be cleared out, and we believe we could put another sports in there, but also the ability to lease out some of those new storage facilities and increase the financial return, which then goes to back to the community. So those are the impacts of that one. The high intensity interval training studio, once again, the major impact will be on our financial returns. If we were to do it, that would significantly improve the returns that we get, which once again would help subsidise our community activities. By not doing that, it means that we miss out on that opportunity, but it also means too that Club Fit, which I believe is one of the leading gyms in this city, does not have a key offering that the city wants, and so that would be that impact. And then the event centre, look, one of the things that we are having to work with at the moment is to really understand what is required from an event centre, and how by building the event centre we can free up court space at Trustpower Bay Park to meet the demands of the indoor sports that we have. At the moment, we have increasing demand for that space from event, exhibition, conference users, and we have increasing demand from sports such as basketball. And that conflict for that space is getting quite intense. It's my belief that we can survive for another year or two by being really smart about how we do things. But sooner or later, at Trustpower Bay Park, I believe that we need to build an event centre to meet the demand that we have in that area and also to free up space. So if you would ask me why have we chosen the two that we have over those three, I'd be saying to you that Greerton absolutely needs it because it is a critical part of our aquatics network and it does need that upgrade. And I would say that we do need to have the Adams Centre as a top priority for investment because it brings jobs to the city. It leverages off the investment we've already made. It gives profile. It gives young athletes an opportunity to develop. And it really does, I think, and it is more urgent, I guess, than the other ones. Ideally, we would love all of them to get across the line, but we understand that the reality is most probably that may not happen. I hope that answers your question, Larry.
Fired up something outside.
Yeah, Councillor Baldock, if in between when you're speaking, if you could turn the mute on, that would be appreciated because we're having the privilege of hearing Gary twice, once from himself and then back through your speaker. So if when you're not speaking, if you could press mute. You have another follow-up question?
Yes, just on the Bay Park Event Centre, you were looking at moving it closer to the stadium and therefore being able to reduce costs. Is this what is in the estimates there now?
Yeah, we originally started off with a much smaller concept alongside the pavilions. When we did our initial sort of concept study and looked at what the demands were and how everything fell into place, we very quickly came to the realisation that we needed a much larger facility that was better integrated into what we currently have. So, for example, one of the real growth markets that we have are conferences. And so by having it adjacent to the current ASB arena, not only can we have the big floor for conferences, but our current suites can be used for breakout rooms, those sort of things. So that is part of an ongoing feasibility study or an ongoing I guess, study that we're doing in terms of finding the optimal facility, for that site and to meet our needs.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Councillor Robson, final question.
Is it possible to have more than one, Chair?
You may have a supplementary if it's not prefaced a lot. Yeah.
Thank you. Look, thanks for the presentation. I note the advice from Veros. Quote suggests that this level of return is comparable and favourable in the current market and that the project is worthy from a financial perspective of proceeding to a more detailed design. But you're not asking for that, are you? You're asking for everything. So in that regard, how much confidence do you have around the figures that you presented to us? What's your confidence level on those figures? I have a couple of supplementaries, if I may.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm happy to answer it. So in terms of the financials that have been put together for the extension business case, I'm really confident in those because we're dealing with tenants that we already have and we're dealing with business units that we're already operating. So in terms of the revenue that we've projected and built into the business model around revenue from tenancies, that is based on the existing tenants taking more space, which they have either verbally or in writing, or in one case both, already indicated that they will take. And as the question was put, if they weren't able to or commit themselves, then we would be in the position of having to find other tenants to fill that space, and I would be reasonably confident we could do that too. We have, for example, New Zealand Cricket in writing looking for more space, but even without an additional tenant, just dealing with the existing, very confident in those numbers.
So you gave me some level of confidence around the revenue side, but the reason I highlighted the Veros line was the other side of your business case is your cost side. Have you done more work since this report was drafted to get some confidence around that cost side? Because Veros, as it's written here, and I note in the report further down, it talks about having permanent tenants, but of course that's a somewhat euphemistic phrase because no tenants are permanent by definition, which is one of the reasons you're having this conversation. So coming back to it, confidence on the cost side of the business case. I appreciate and accept your answer on the revenue side, but on the cost side, and this council has some significant experience with risks on the cost side of projects.
I don't disagree. I think the comment that you've taken out of the report needs to be considered in the context of the entire sentence, and the rest of it says there is opportunity to identify opportunities for savings to be valued engineered through a design and build procurement process. So certainly I have confidence, having dealt with Veros previously around this project, that they were very accurate in their initial estimates. In fact, we came in under budget in the first round of the massive renovation we did to the initial Cosmopolitan Club based on that. And then in terms of what they're hinting at here, I think it's more geared towards the fact that we could value engineer savings as opposed to they are prefacing that we might perhaps be undercooked in terms of the projections.
Thank you.
Final question from the Mayor.
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you to the team here. Great presentation, and wonderful to see the, excuse me, the level of input into this. It is critical to have your expertise in an area that's very, very valuable to the community. My question is a bit of a supplementary to John's, and just looking at the IRRs, if you put a 1,000-year flood over this, should Rugby leave? And I don't doubt for a second that you would replace them. I take your point, Justine, particularly about the quality of that tenant. But I just want to know if what you have done with the IRRs, looking at them, because they're quite low, is I guess where I'm coming from. And that would be anticipated, given the nature of this organisation. I wouldn't expect them to be, 15% at all. But I just wondered if you'd just thrown the 1,000-year flood across it, if there's a tenant exit for a period of time, what that would look like. Thank you.
In terms of the tenants exiting, I think the risk here for us is low. What we're doing here is we're dealing with specialist tenants. So we have purposely tried to restrict ourselves to dealing with sporting organisations because that's the nature of the business that we're in. However, should we just need to generate revenue through tenancies, there are a number of organisations that would want to take that space that are just associated with sporting organisations. So, the list is reasonably long in terms of physios, other sort of sporting provision providers. Yeah.
I will indulge Councillor Aubrey. We do have a little bit of time pressure.
Just indicating that I'm happy to move.
Fantastic, my friend. Thank you to Bay Venues. Thank you for the presentation. We'll move to recommendations now, colleagues, on page 6. And I would make the observation with regard to the decisions we are making today. All of them relate to putting projects into our draft annual plan. So we're not actually making decisions to approve or not approve projects. We're deciding whether to put them in or not into our draft annual plan, which we will of course consult widely with the community on and then have a decision in May, June. That's the process. Councillor Aubrey has kindly given notice that he wishes to move something. So what do you wish to move, Councillor?
I'd like to move A through to E and then take F to C separately.
Yes, that's right. So F2 and F1 are ORs, and Councillor Aubrey is moving F2. Is that, or you're prepared to move A to E, and are you also moving F2, or are you preferring someone else do that?
F2 as a separate motion.
Okay, yes, we can take that separately. Councillor Aubrey is moving A to F2. Do I have a seconder for that?
Clarification to the chair.
Yes?
B has an and or between 1 and 2. That's what I was referring to.
So, Councillor Aubrey, you're moving 1 and 2 of B, is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct. Okay. Do I have a seconder for that course of action? That is seconded by Councillor Baldock. Speaking to it, Councillor Aubrey?
to me, it makes sense to add all the projects that we need to prioritise during the annual plan into that draft plan, and we do the prioritisation then.
Councillor Baldock is seconder. Do you wish to speak now?
Yes, I think it's been very well thought through and very well presented. Obviously, we do have prioritisation things, as Councillor Arbery has said, when we get into the annual plan, but I can't see any reason why we wouldn't adopt this at this point and try and get some go forward. These things are very valuable for our growing city. Just to comment in relation to the and or, given that that does have to be clarified, I'm assuming it's and, one and
That's
two.
correct.
Can you be? And then option 2C, I think it is time that we made some increase in the contribution we make, for all the reasons that have been outlined in the report. And I think sharing that between users and the ratepayer is the right thing to do. Thank you.
There are additional speakers. Speaking to it myself, should we work through the annual plan and everything's into the mix and we make the decision with all the competing priorities, I would certainly love to see the rejuvenation of the Greerton pool there. It certainly is getting a little bit tired, and I do note that in 1997, during the school swimming sports, I gained a new appreciation for the use of speedos, because from that particular grandstand, which is proposed to be replaced, some of my fellow students were sitting there and they witnessed, because I was a very fast swimmer, but my togs were quite a drag, so they witnessed me finishing the race sans togs. So looking forward to having that very slippery and regrettable grandstand removed. Right, a reply, Councillor Arbery.
No thanks.
Okay, I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye and raise your hand. Aye, that is Councillor Morris, Councillor
Aye.
Arbery, Councillor Salisbury, Councillor Robson, Councillor Kitty, Councillor Clout, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Hollis, Mayor Powell and Councillor Baldock. Unanimous, I declare the motion carried. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Bay Venues. Colleagues, now moving to page 219 of our agenda, the annual plan update, and Mr. Joel Peters is going to brief us on this paper. Page 219. Thank you, Joel. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for the presentation to come up. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just a quick update today. What I'd like to note is on the screen here we have the updated timeline. Through the report, in the report summarises some of the changes that have happened since December, and we are looking to come back to you in 4th of March as opposed to today to discuss the refined budget, the expenditure funding issues and option analysis, and consider the revised capital program, the reasons for which are covered in the report. We also have a number of recommendations we're discussing today, and these are in B, to approve the inclusion into the capital program, prioritising expenditure to two items. So the increase of capacity of the Oropi water treatment plant and to construct an offloading wharf at the Marine Precinct, and we have staff here today that can talk to that. And we also have C, which is approving a continuation of funding of destination management from the airport activity surplus. The key difference is B, that is to include things into the prioritisation process. C is actually something we have budgeted in December and presented to you, and it's just confirming that that remains in. And also for today is just noting some additional requests will be brought to you on the 4th of March. Thank you.
Questions, colleagues? Councillor Robson.
Could we, for the purpose of putting light around my question, go back to the timeline that you put up there? In terms of the consultation, you've got up there March, April, yet we're not going to be adopting the consultation items until the 24th of March. So would it be more accurate to have April as the consultation period effectively by the time one's adopted and then prepared consultation material in some way, shape or form and got it out? And I'm just asking, you know, would that be a more accurate reflection of when the consultation period would be?
Thank you. Yeah, effectively, from the 24th of March, we'd be ready to start consulting, but it would run for the majority of April. So April is...
I think there's 7 days from the 24th, but I could be double counting. It might be 6. Councillor.
Yeah, in supplementary, I have had, and I'm not alone, issues in the past with the collateral used for consultation in the city. I continue to have issues with current consultation material that's out in the city. There has been a tradition over the past few years of elected members having an opportunity to consider the quality of the collateral. Obviously, I've failed to get my opinion across successfully in a number of those interactions. Saying that, I'd like to know whether there's still going to be that opportunity, and if so, where in this timeline it sits.
So what we've committed to in the, you'll see in next steps, so that's 46 in the report, that will be bringing to you the consultation plan alongside the updated budget. So that has some of the key messages we will be looking at consulting on. However, the actual decision on what we'll be consulting on will be from the also on the 4th of March. So that's the bulk of the decisions will happen there. So it's the full collateral, or the full consultation document, will effectively be written concurrently, and we'll be looking at the actual consultation plan and the majority of the key messaging of what we're taking back to you on the 4th of March.
Further questions? Councillor Baldock, do you have a question? No? I have a question in terms, and I see we've got our water team here, in terms of the Waiorohi stream and the Oropi water treatment plant upgrade. I note there is some potential consenting pressure on abstraction from that stream in the future. Is this upgrade more of a technology kind of upgrade to the plant rather than an increase in abstraction?
So currently it would be increase on our existing take. So we currently estimate our total treatment capacity at Oropi at 30,000 cubic meters a day. The idea is to increase that by steps of around 3,500, anywhere from 30 to 40. That would still be well within our existing consent take. We've had an assessment done previously by the expert who did the Waiari consenting process, and he indicated that if there was a reduction, it would probably be in the order of up to the 40,000 mark. So that's the opportunity that we're looking at to utilize the additional capacity on the consent.
Is there a risk with the, I think there's a change in terms of the national policy statement on fresh water and water takes? Is there a risk that, however light, that having improved this infrastructure, that we have to at some stage wind back our water take from that catchment?
There's always a risk. Again, it's a calculated one based on what we believe is a scientific approach to the future consents.
Final question from me on that topic. Would the increase in capacity in Oropi essentially remove the need for water restrictions in 21-22 for that year, given current water usage?
So the idea would be that it would contribute to alleviating that issue. We would reassess the limit at which we would restrict. Obviously, it can't be demand unabated, but certainly would assist in alleviating it significantly.
Thank you. Councillor Aubrey. Great minds. Okay. Chief Executive, do you wish to comment on Councillor Robson's question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. There has been a session scheduled for councillors as part of the consultation material and document that will go out. It's been built into our program, so yes, you will have a detailed involvement in that process.
Thank you.
Councillor Clout.
Thank you very much. Just in relation to the offloading wharf at the Marine Precinct, and in paragraph 21 it says that preliminary engagement with users has been received positively. Can you just elaborate on the nature of that engagement, and if we were to sit down and talk with them today, would they indeed say that they're very comfortable with the proposed new design?
So yes, in terms of that engagement, so current annual plan had a $600,000 wharf in it. The conversations through the Marine Precinct Advisory Group indicated that that wasn't going to deliver what was needed down there. That advisory group has been working through other options, including this one, and the members of that advisory group to date have all indicated that they are comfortable with the current provisioning, noting that we're only at early design point in terms of what that looks like.
Any additional questions, colleagues? No, there being none, if you could turn your mind to the recommendations on page 219. Is there somebody prepared to move those recommendations or other? Councillor Clout, are you prepared to move the recommendations? Okay, is there a seconder for that course of action? Seconded by Councillor Kitty. Do you wish to speak
Thank
to it,
you.
Councillor
Just
Clout?
very briefly, clearly staff have gone through a lot of work to put these recommendations up to us. I think they all make very good logical sense, and I believe that, well, in each case you could go through and say that, you know, like the Oropi water treatment plant obviously is important that we improve supply, but also resilience, I note, is another important element of that. I won't go through all the rest, but I'm very happy to support these recommendations.
Councillor Kitty is seconded. Do you wish to speak? No. Any other speakers? Councillor Baldock, do you wish to speak? Councillor Robson.
Yeah, I just think for the purposes of those listening that it would be helpful for the chair to reiterate that these are not decisions set in stone. It's really, really important for us to manage this process. It doesn't help if a councillor says or indicates that they've already made a decision on a topic, makes a public affirmation that it makes total sense before we've actually even put the list together of what we think should be in and out, and certainly well before we've started to engage, consult with our community. So if the chair sort of makes that explicit, then the media get the messaging right, and those people listening to us directly get the message right, and there's a chance that we'll get to a good place.
Thank you, Councillor Robson. I have full faith that as my colleagues walk into the deliberations, that they do so with an open mind, as always. Any other speakers to the motion? Councillor Clout, do you wish to have a right of reply?
Oh, just to say that it makes total sense to put this in for consultation with the public, and then we will enter the deliberations with an open mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Can I please... Oh, I'm going to do the hands thing. Hands up, those who say aye. And Councillor Baldock as well. That's Councillor Arbery, Councillor Salisbury, Councillor Robson, Councillor Kitty, Councillor Clout, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Hollis, Mayor Powell, Councillor Baldock, Councillor Morris. I declare it carried unanimously. Thank you, colleagues. Now let's move on to agenda item 7.3, which is the draft fees for the development contributions policy. There is, please note, a tabled item. You would have received the email on that last night, and that it's been a tabled item. It's coming around to you now. And that is on page 225 on your agenda. Speaking to it is Anna Blackwood and Jeremy Bose.
But only briefly. We'll take it as being read. You have got the tabled item, the fairly extensive QA process that the annual plan always goes through, picked up a couple of things very late, which didn't get into the report. Just a reminder that development contributions are a cost recovery tool. So with the DCs, and the DC's policy comes at the end of the long shoot. You put all the budgets in and all the costs in, and these numbers pop out at the end. The only way of changing these numbers is by changing things at the top end of the shoot, not at the bottom end of the shoot. The resolution, or the recommended resolution, is simply along the notes line. So this is just FYI at this stage, just so that you've seen these things before they come through into the adoption document in a week or two's time.
Colleagues, any questions of staff of that paper? Councillor Robson.
Yeah, and for people listening, and including possibly some of the newer colleagues, the point made by Jeremy about the nature of the shoot and that it's a cost recovery exercise, clearly the evidence is, for various reasons, we don't recover the costs. That's why we have some large debts sitting on our balance sheet, amongst other things. Can you give us a little bit more about the process for, if you like, the shoot development, the interactions between staff and developers, the rules that we're bound by, so people can understand that that cost recovery issue has constraints that are not within our gift to change? Is that possible?
Possibly. It might take away the brevity of this presentation. There's probably two questions within that. The first question is the interaction with the developers, and the second is how we end up not necessarily recovering. The first part, most of this, the numbers which come through here come through budgets. The budgets themselves come through structure planning as to what is needed in a particular urban growth area, be it greenfields or infill. A lot of the greenfield structure planning is done very much with the developers as far as what does this area need, what's it going to cover, what are we going to use the area for, and therefore what infrastructure is required now and in perpetuity. So that's the beginning part of the conversation. The why don't we recover everything is effectively because legislatively the odds are stacked against us. If, for instance, if we predict a project which might not take place for 10 years is going to cost 10 million, and it eventually costs 12, and we only know that after we've built it, but we've been recovering in advance for that for a while, we don't get to add the 2 million on. We just have to wear that one, and effectively that means the ratepayers wear that. On the other side, if we predicted it to be 10 million, and once it was built it was 8, effectively we've got to give back the 2 to the people who paid for that along the way. So immediately the odds are stacked against us. And that's probably the shorthand version. The longhand version goes on about a week and a half.
Supplementary?
Thank you. The shorthand version works very well for me. Thank you.
Councillor Baldock, do you have a question? Yes, Councillor Baldock.
Just following on from that question, am I coming through okay? I've just switched to headphones.
Yes, clearly, yep.
Can you hear me okay? Yep. Yeah, Jeremy, that is one good reason why we have consistently appealed to the government, as have other councils, that they should allow us something like a 10% contingency in the calculation with the developers, so that we have that there for that very reason. Is that correct?
Yes.
That was a yes. Councillor Clout.
Thank you, Jeremy and Anna. Thanks for this tabled item, and it sort of begs the question when you look at the narrative in terms of the Wairaki change, the increase from 9.8 million to 56 million, and likewise the Welcome Bay Road, the reservoir increasing from 8.4 to 36.1. It does beg the question, you know, why is there such a massive variation to those figures, please?
Yeah. So the Wairaki one in particular, it becomes, while it's in there as that project has increased, effectively it's a different project. So if you take the original project, it was a placeholder in the LTP 2.5 years ago. In looking at the needs of that area, the future ongoing needs of the area, looking at our resilience requirements, they've changed the route, they've actually extended that project. Initially it was a duplicate water main, or a renewal of a water main and some growth aspect built in from about Flashen Island up to Tamunga. It has become, having looked at all the issues, particularly around the resilience and then the future servicing of the east, it now is running from Opal Drive all the way up to Tamunga, and it's a duplicate. And I believe it's actually bigger as well. So it looks like the project has got bigger. It's actually a different project. Yeah, the scope has changed significantly. The resilience built into it, the routing of that has changed quite significantly. Similar, and the other issue with the Welcome Bay and the water pipe is that some of the lessons learnt from the Waiari tendering process, which surprised everybody involved, have been built in as well. So you've got that whole reassess the project, and then what's the better information. This information was actually known a little while ago through the team, but the processing of it got interrupted, and that's where the QA came in the last week to pick it up.
Mayor Powell, question.
Thank you. I just want to pick this to pieces just a little bit more, Jeremy, if I may, please. Yeah, we talk about a 10% contingency and what have you around that. I mean, this is significantly greater than 10%. 10% would make it 9 point whatever. Historically, we as a council have failed at getting things on track, on budget, and I guess my learning as somebody new here is that the resilience issues, the technical issues, all the underground stuff does create costs that may not be apparent in other cities in New Zealand quite to this level, and we've seen evidence of that with in the private sector as well. There's no question about that. And the only difference between the private sector and the public sector is that the private sector don't necessarily have to declare where their cost overruns come from. Now, and that's all very fine, we do. How do we get better at this? Because we know the resilience issues are there, we know that the geotechnical issues are there, and when I see a budget of 8.4 or 5 and now 38, I worry a lot, I have to say.
I'm probably going to take the sidestep on this one and refer to my initial comments, which is that the DC stuff is the end of the chute. What you're talking about is the top of the chute. And if Nick was here, I'd probably defer to Nick or maybe the Chief Executive about the work that's been done on project management right from the initiation of projects and the costing of those projects right the way through to delivery. Yeah, or maybe not.
Yeah, look, we have recognised this as an issue, and I think historically projects have evolved in isolation to a wider conversation across the organisation around risk management and budgetary controls. And I think what you're finding, the work that we've done and the work that Sean McHale is doing at the moment for us around procurement, probity, tendering, and our project management office will just continue to improve the accuracy of our estimates, ensure that when we are at the very early stages of a project, we're very, very careful about quoting numbers unless there's some robust information to support it. So, because essentially what I think happens is early on projects are costed. Obviously we don't know the level of detail sufficient to get those costs accurate, and we tend to build budgets around those early numbers. We find ourselves coming back invariably with increase after increase.
On these two specific instances, to support what the Chief Executive is saying, That's exactly what's happened here. These initial budgets were put together 3 or 4 years ago for the LTP, which was adopted 2 or 3 years ago. The extra work and the extra resourcing the organisation has had in the last couple of years to tear these things apart, to check, to question, that's where the changes have come from. And the person who has put this together, that role didn't exist 2 years ago. That team under Andy Mead has expanded. We've got more chance to challenge, to test, to think differently, and then go back. So what you're seeing here at the budget end, in our view, is an improvement on only seeing it when we actually build the darn thing and you get what you call an overrun. We're just increasing budgets at the moment. Can it be done better in the future? Absolutely, but we're still catching up now from 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
Final question, Councillor Robson.
Happy to move, Chair.
Councillor Robson has indicated he wishes to move the recommendations on page 225. Do we have a seconder for that course of action? Seconded by Councillor Salisbury. Councillor Robson, do you wish to speak to it?
Well, because I think we need to A, pass this motion, but B, contextualise some of the learnings that are being raised here. And I think the Mayor's questions apposite. You know, these are not just issues of fluctuations. But to me, they reflect governance over many years that's failed to understand the importance of building a quality machine and hasn't resourced the organisation, recognised the complexity of the environment in which the organisation operates. I think too often people with a lack of commercial experience, and that's changed a little bit, Mayor not least, have been focused on, if you like, unfortunately, those decisions with a high amount of political heat rather than those decisions with significant cost and risks. So I think we are getting better as an organisation, but we've still got a way to go. And the message for me is we need to invest in this organisation, invest in the people, the tools. We've seen this around transport and not having planning models. We've seen it around not having data to feed models. All these things are in the process of being improved. But I fear they won't be improved if we take our eye off building the machine that will make this city thrive and get involved in debates and discussions around if they're nice to haves. Yeah? So it's not just a cost issue. But yeah, we don't have a choice here. It would be nice to recover more. As has been pointed out, we have legislative constraints, we have practical constraints, we have a dynamic environment. I come back to we need to make sure that we have a machine staffed with capable people who have capacity to do quality work. And as long as we don't fund the machine, and I use that term in the nicest possible sense, yeah, well-oiled, well-fueled, fit for purpose, we need that. And progress is being made, but it's a long way to go.
Councillor Salisbury, do you wish to speak? No. Councillor Baldock, do you wish to speak? Any further speakers? Do you wish to exercise right of reply to yourself, Councillor Robson? No. I shall now put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye and raise your hands. It's Councillor Morris, Councillor Arbery, Councillor Salisbury, Councillor Robson, Councillor Kitty, Councillor Clout, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Hollis, Mayor Temby Powell and Councillor Baldock. That is, I declare that carried unanimously. Now, colleagues, if we could turn to the final item on the agenda, page 229, the draft user fees and charges. And we have Tracy Hughes, Joel Peters and Catherine Sharpman to speak to us on that paper.
Afternoon. You have in front of you the user fees and charges report, which summarises the attachment, which is the fees and charges we're proposing or recommending to set for next year's for next financial year. So the fees and charges contained in that report constitute about 30% of the revenue, operating revenue for next year for the council, and they have been incorporated in the draft budgets that you've seen to date. So any changes that you might make in considering this paper, we would adjust into the report that you see on the 4th of March. So the summary, they're based, for this annual plan, the fees and charges are based around CPI movements overall. We've identified various activities that have chosen not to move their charges, and that's primarily because when you have kind of broadly set charges, a 1.9% increase isn't always sensible, and they've sort of made big moves in the past compared to their costs. We have in the tables on page 230 a number of areas where movements are higher than CPI, and those are explained in the attachment for those items. And we have some proposed new fees, which again are explained in the attachment. And so those costs are based, those charges are based around cost recovery, so the costs we're experiencing and what we consider to be reasonable rates. So the next steps is that whatever you decide would be consulted on concurrently with the consultation for the annual plan. So, take any questions?
Thank you, Catherine. My personal view is that always user fee and charges increases are modest relative to the residential rate increases. Given we're talking about only 30% of our revenue as a city, how much scope, this is a terribly unpopular question, but how much scope is there within user fees and charges for increases to basically assist the burden that's on residential ratepayers?
As I said before, the charges are based on cost recovery, so that's how councils operate. So we do encourage the activity managers to consider all the costs. There may be some areas in which they're keeping them very tight, but that will be because they're considering what are comparable rates and what are reasonable charges. Does anyone, do people want to add anything to that for the particular activity?
Potentially supplementary, and I suppose it takes me a while always to get to what I'm actually asking, is there any legislative constraint in going beyond cost recovery? And again, terribly unpopular question to ask, but I'd just like to ask the question.
Through the Chair, there's a couple of things in there. One is your revenue and financing policy dictates what the framework for that. The other is that there are certain pieces of legislation that apply. So, for example, the Building Act in terms of what fees that could be charged through that area, but that is not across all areas, so there is some flexibility in some other areas.
Thank you. Any other questions, colleagues? Councillor Baldock, any question? No? Councillor Robson.
In the light of the Chair's sort of opening up the broader issue, and at the risk of being frowned on by my colleague Councillor Arbery, not for the first time this week, about getting into the weeds, it strikes me that the airport landing charges for non-regular light aircraft, it says regular reviews carried out every 5 years. Can I ask when the last review was and how much the increase was at that point?
I'll get that information back to you in terms of, I think it was the last long-term plan, but the amount I couldn't confirm, so I'll have to confirm that. Obviously with the implicit question that, you know, if I'm flying a light aircraft for a hobby, you know, I've probably got sufficient, give up a litre of avgas and pay a bit more for the landing fees. It's just, you know. The Chair, just in addition to note that the bulk of landing fees are actually through the main carrier that come through. So yes, provide that information, but the bulk of the fees is through, obviously, the national carrier.
Sure.
No further questions? Okay, colleagues, on page 229 are some recommendations. Is anyone prepared to move those or something different? We do need a mover. Councillor Arbery, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hollis. Councillor Arbery, do you wish to speak to it?
Only that none of the changes in fees stood out to me as being massively out of place. So I think that, I don't see any reason to second guess the work the staff have done with these particular fee changes.
Councillor Hollis, you wish to speak to it?
Just to echo Councillor Arbery.
Councillor Baldock, do you wish to speak to it? Any other speakers?
Could I
Yes, Councillor Hughes.
speak?
Yes.
I'm just wondering about the airport charges, and we are currently, are we running out of airport parking? Is what I heard recently, that we're stretched for airport parking right now, but our charges are relatively low.
Yes, that's correct. We are doing expansions, but there are some more major expansions that are planned through future long-term planned years, and that pricing will be aligned with it's only some short-term capacity that's being created now. So it is an opportunity, there is the opportunity also ways to increase those fees, but we're putting that in line with the additional level of service that comes in place when we have significant more capacity there.
Thank you.
Any further speakers? No, I'd just simply make the observation on reading the user fees and charges that Tauranga City Council does not distinguish or show partiality between the sheep and the goats impounding fees, which I thought was interesting. I thought the goats should be paying a lot more. So no further speakers. Councillor Arbery, do you wish to exercise a right of reply? No. Sorry, that was just a little joke with religious undertones. I will now put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Say aye. Councillor Morris, Councillor Arbery, Councillor Salisbury, Councillor Kitty, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Hollis, Mayor Timmy Powell, Councillor Larry Baldock. All those against, please raise your hands. All those abstaining, please raise your hands. That's an abstention from Councillor Robson. Thank you. I declare the motion carried, and there are no late items, so I do declare this meeting closed. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, staff. Thank you to the 6 people watching online, and thank you to Sam from the Bay of Plenty Times.